Yeah, I can hear you.
One thing for me is I really don't totally prefer either KDE or GNOME, or for that matter, any of the other desktop environments. The thing is, I like how KDE looks more, but I like how GNOME works.
100% agreement there, yeah. Every time I've used KDE, I've tried it on my desktop, on about 3 different distros, on my laptop the same way, and it has just always, it's looked beautiful and it's performed horribly. It's like working in molasses. And if I go to GNOME on any OS, on any distro, whatever, it works perfectly, very quickly on everything.
See, that's the number one complaint I hear about KDE. Either I have much better computers than I think I do, or the distros I usually use KDE on are doing a lot of tweaks that I don't know about. I don't know.
I can't remember how much I've used the KDE version of PC Linux or not. I think I used it in a VM, and I'm not sure if I've tried it on actual bare metal.
Okay.
I know I've used the GNOME version briefly. I don't know. I'll have to give it a shot at some point.
No, because I mean, like, I've got, because like people say what you're saying, that this horrible lag. I've got KDE 4. It's actually 451.
Nice.
I have Compiz running. It is a POS system. It's just a simple Duo, 2 gigahertz.
That may actually be the difference. You have Compiz. Do you not have KWin running?
I usually don't use KWin. I usually use Compiz in conjunction with.
When I've been doing it, I used to avoid Compiz like the plague, so I would leave KWin running, and that could be what's actually causing the issues for me.
That may be what it is, because I've not ever used KDE for prolonged periods using the native K, and that is true. Compiz does override all of that.
Right.
Why do you avoid Compiz like the plague? That's another thing to bring up here, because in both cases, with GNOME and KDE and almost any other desktop environment, you can launch Compiz or add Compiz to it, in which case Compiz will take over the native window management and add all the Compiz functionality.
Well, in my case, I tend to avoid it just because in the past it has hurt my performance a little bit. Up recently, when I've been doing screencasting and everything, it's actually very useful to have at least the Zoom plugin, so I have been using it for that. Other than that, I use the shift switcher, and that's about it.
Yeah, see, it's like I use Scale and Expo a lot. So I honestly could not live without Compiz, because I just need that. I use the Zoom, like you say, too. Some of those effects, like the spinning cube and I'm going to paint fire everywhere. It's like, okay, yeah. It looks neat, but it gets old quick. The same thing with the raindrops. Oh, let me put the fire out with my raindrops. It's like, oh, there's plenty of eye candy, but some of it's just playing for playing's sake, if we're honest there. But I mean, like, those are the 3 I use, and like I'll use the shift switcher too. Those are really the main 4 I use. It's just.
Well, it appears Amarok does work in GNOME, but it seems to be kind of buggy on Arch. I've used it in GNOME before, but it's been a while.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I know people who have made it work, but it's always, that's like the complaint I get, it's buggy. I haven't actually tried it myself. I know, like, the preferred for GNOME is Rhythmbox, and the preferred for KDE is Armok. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's just the way they integrate. I don't really know.
They make heavy use of GNOME and KDE API.
Say that again?
They probably make really heavy use of the GNOME and KDE API, or I think KDE is just the Qt. But either way, they probably make heavy use of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably what it is. So it's trying to work out of its element.
It's just that they were developed for that specific,
Right. Oh, and honestly, I would say they're pretty comparable programs. So it's like when you do occasionally run into that, okay, this program is really intended more for over here. Very rarely have I found there isn't a counterpart over here. It's just, it may be called "g" this instead of "k" that. It's like I'm sure Kwrite isn't in GNOME, but I'm sure there's some equivalent that's just, I don't know what the favorite GNOME text editor is.
Gedit by far, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's like...
I've always equated gedit to Kate, but similar idea.
Yeah, it's... As long as it shows the different code in different colors and the lines and allows you to group to shrink down groups of things you're not screwing with right now, it meets the criteria of a good text editor. And the rest is purely just play with stuff. I will say this, why Microsoft cannot make a text editor that has spell check in it is beyond my comprehension. It's a damn useful feature, and that's a feature I find in every Linux text editor, regardless. Join the 21st century, Microsoft. Please join the 21st century.
Even Nano has a spell check.
I know. It's just, for some reason...
Microsoft will be glad to give you one of those for some money.
Well, no, that's honestly the thing I can't figure out. I know what's doing that is it's just all of those are tying into the same spell check in an open source OS, like in a Linux distro. That's why spell check winds up in everything. It's just tying into the open source spell check. But honestly, the logic I've never got is that if you've installed Microsoft Office on your computer, then shouldn't all the Microsoft programs utilize the spell check database in this Microsoft program?
If the programs were written smartly, possibly, but...
Because on other platforms, that's usually the way it works. But for some reason, Windows has never gotten that.
Now, from experience at work, it is possible to tie other apps into the Microsoft spell checker, but you have to actually implement those. You have to implement some additional DLLs and things like that. I wasn't actually the one that did it, but they did tie it into Word spell checker, and it works very, very terribly.
Maybe that's why MS doesn't do it.
It has to open a full instance of Word, and it, for some reason, can't bring that to the front and make that the... I don't know. Not my place to even worry about it.
Yeah. What were you saying, James?
I was saying that the reason most other OSs do it is because, even Mac OS, they all are based on Unix.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I'm wondering if this isn't because of these are both Unix-like systems, and in that the modular nature of them allows that to be very easy. And if you tried to do this in Windows, you'd wind up with the problem Jordan was just talking about, in which, I'm sorry, this can't be run modularly, so let me waste a whole shitload of system resources doing something that I don't need to be doing, but because I am...
You want to run a lightweight text editor. Oh, you want spell checker? We're going to run the very heavy text editor in the background to do that.
Yeah.
So it's just that, it's... by the whole basis of what a Unix operating system is, it's to have separate you should never have a big program that does everything. You should always separate it into parts. That's not the Windows philosophy. So, yeah, that's why it's so much easier on any Unix-based OS, because the programs are always separated into small little parts that you can use freely.
Well, and you know the thing I love about that so much, aside from the fringe benefits of the stuff we're talking about here, I love the fact that when in a Unix or Linux system something crashes, that the whole OS doesn't go with it. That I still, for the most part, have full control of the system, aside from this little glitch here. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but it's so much better than the way it does it in a system that isn't modularized like that, where, okay, so I should come back tomorrow when you've caught up with all of this, right? That does get just a tad annoying every now and then.
Most I've ever had for my Linux when I'm using Linux and crashing is it dropping down to terminal. It's never gone farther than that. But the worst that ever happens is if it drops down to terminal, and if you know your terminal well enough, you can bring it back completely.
I would argue that dropping down to terminal would be considered a terminal screen of death for the average end user, because the average end user does not know terminal. For a power user, it's not. And a worst case scenario, the commands you should teach someone is how to log out and reboot, because worst case scenario, you type those two commands, you will get everything back. However, the only time I have ever been able to do that on a Linux system is when I was running Linux on a system it should not have been running on, that had overly abundance of non-supported proprietary hardware, which was leading to heat issues. And when the thing got beyond its operating system criteria, it just didn't want to run right, and Linux would inevitably do that. Aside from that, I have never been able to cause that kind of crash in Linux, even when I accidentally deleted core parts of the operating system. It's just, Linux is hard to crash. It's very hard to screw up a Unix-like system that badly. It's hard to do. You have to deliberately be trying to do it most of the time. I don't know what y'all's experience is like that, but that's my general experience when it comes to that.
As long as you're not ripping out components of the OS and replacing them with unstable ones and running things like a fork bomb, yeah, it's generally for everyday use and for even extended hardcore type use. It's a lot more stable in my experience.
Well, no, no, go ahead.
I haven't had oh look, the driver crashed, so now you have a blue screen and you have to restart, and oh look, it's a restart loop now.
Oh, did you not want blue screen theater today? It's like
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you may say that dropping down to terminal is bad, and even though it might be equivalent to the blue screen of death, the thing is, when you go to blue screen, you generally lose all your data that you were working on. And if you can recover it, you usually have to pay someone or know a lot of stuff. When you drop down to terminal, you only have to know a few commands, and you could recover completely back to where you were before. You don't have to lose your data.
that is true, but it requires getting familiar with the terminal, which is something I just don't see the average end user doing. But yeah, like you say, if you're a little bit in the tech know, yeah, you're right. You can not lose everything.
I would say it's easier to get your data back from the terminal than getting it back after a blue screen.
It depends on the app, but usually, yeah.